Welcome to David's Rebel Coding Podcast. So we're going to look at a modern way to make a web application. We're going to show you how easy it could be if the tech companies actually cared. They could easily make it easy to make a web application, but instead they make it difficult and they charge an awful lot for things that are basic. So let's look at the old web. MSN.com is an example of an old way of doing a web application. And what do I mean by that? It means that they have not thought about the user's experience when they've created the technology that powers this website. So for example, if a user comes to this website and they want to change a category, like let's say I want to go into news or sports or play or money or one of these other categories, if I click on it, the whole web application just vanishes out of existence and has to be recreated from scratch. Now, this was the old way of making a web application. It makes for a poor user experience when they're on the website. So let's take a look at how that works. Blanked out completely. If we go back to Discover again, but I still wanted to see the menus at least. Why aren't the menus staying there? So the modern way to do it is like the Financial Times of England. What they do is they only update the elements of the website that are affected by the change, and they leave everything else on the screen. So that's the proper way to do it. The modern way, the React way. It gives you a more powerful user interface. The user feels like they're in control of navigating around the web application, and it just updates the data and components that are affected by what the user's actions were. So let's see if we can create a website like that does not cost. If I look at the IBM licensing to do an Oracle backend, Java, Spring Boot, Oracle database platform, it costs $34,000 a year just to host the web application and $185,000 to build it. And with that, you get IBM compliance, which means that you get legal risk management. You go through the whole audit life cycle of the project. So let's see if we can do it all just using a template engine for in like 5 minutes. So we want to create this Financial Times website in 5 minutes. So stay tuned. Let's see if we can do it. Any bets? All right, so I'm going to start with a brand new page. So I've created one here called Newspaper. Now I'll teach a little bit while I'm developing. So a static HTML, CSS, JavaScript website, you would just hard code what you want on here. So we would say this is David's Rebel Coding Podcast. This would be an example of just a static HTML website. But if we want to get data from a database and display it dynamically, then it becomes a data-driven web application. So our news articles, we want to feed from a database. And they talked about Java and Oracle being the technology that powers it. So let's say we want it to come from the back end. So we'll say David and Corin podcast. If I save it like this, you'll see it not updated on the screen, but in this declarative world, we can just embed the data directly by the name of the variable that we've saved. So we can create as many variables as you want to create our website, and then we can get them from the database. So here, now it's a data-driven web application, but it's only powered with JavaScript, so it's still all client-side. So to get the server-side enterprise-grade Java Oracle backend database, what we need to use is something called the auth manager. So we're going to define some JSON. So this is going to be JSON syntax. So let's call this our schema, for example, will equal this. And then if we want to create a database with this schema, all we have to do is call authmanager.post MySQL, the name of our database table that we want to create. So in this example, it's the Financial Times, because this is the newspaper we're trying to create. And then I just pass it the schema object, and then a couple of parameters if we want to force the schema to look exactly like what we have. Like you can shrink and expand with whatever columns that you want. This is the actual schema that we want to create. Then what you would do is you would just use the parameter sync is true and force is true. And then it's asynchronous callback, so you use await. And then this will create the schema for us on the back end. So for example, if I logged into my SQL Oracle account, then we could look at that. So if I describe the table financial times, you'll see that it created this table for us. So like, for example, if I wanted to get rid of, or if I want to add another image placeholder and then get rid of the other one, so I'm basically renaming the column, I would just change my JSON to how I want it. And then when I ran it again, and type that right, describe. Describe financial times. Then you'll see that it's renamed the column by the new name that you've created. So so you have total control over your database schema. And that was a big part of the cost of the Oracle Java implementation. So once we get that out of the way, then we can just focus on binding the data in the right format that we want and displaying it on the web page. So I'll give you another example. So let's just go, and I'm going to amalgamate a collection of articles, and I'm just going to populate them into my database. And then I'm going to group them by the column type that the articles belong to. And then I'm going to create this dynamic refresh so that I can show you how we can query different articles in our database without ever leaving the page. Just illustrating that you can update individual parts of the web page without ever leaving. So this creates that user-friendly experience and a richer UI for your users. So let's go back to our newspaper, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to replace this with this code, and this should create the helper function. And then what we can do is we just work on our CSS and then our HTML. And so for example, if I wanted to loop through, let me just grab a code snippet here, and let's say this with the template that you can display the articles. I think it's title, and then it'll let me know if I've made an error. Content, it's not content, it's summary. So now I have the articles displaying from a simple map loop. So you can learn in JavaScript how to do a template literal map loop, and then you can embed your HTML and your data directly into the template. So then you're just working as a graphic designer, designing these templates. So let's grab the CSS and see if we can include that in our page. So does it look a lot better once we get the CSS in place? So I'm going to copy some CSS, and you've developed that. You can put it in, and it's going to start quickly looking like a little bit more like the Financial Times that we wanted to develop. Now you can add this button that can update the page with different content without ever actually leaving the page. You don't have to write a huge amount of code anymore to do that. And because we use the helper function, it's automatically published to the window, so you can just call it directly. So you don't have to learn like a new API or anything like that. You can just go with the existing. So let me see if I copy this new template into HTML here. You'll see that it's starting to look a lot more like our Financial Times newspaper. And now when you click on one of these links, what will happen is it will update the content dynamically without ever leaving the page. So literally, while I've been talking here, it probably only took about 3 or 4 minutes to make this website, and it's already way ahead of the MSN.com Microsoft website. We're using Oracle and Java as a backend, and we didn't have to pay IBM uh, fees, like the cost of the IBM audit for what it would cost for a major company like that. And we get all the benefits of all that modern technology, all done in 5 or 10 minutes. Now, the question I'm leaving the readers here is, if these trillion-dollar tech companies know about this is the secret, then why are they charging so much? And why does it take so long? And why is it so convoluted? Why have they not made it easier for developers to develop web applications? And instead, things are getting more and more difficult, even with artificial intelligence. And a simple guy in his basement coding for a couple of weeks can create this sort of a system. And it's really the way it should be developed. You're just focusing on the declarative language templates, and it's a no-code environment. So the database backend, which would traditionally require thousands of lines of code to achieve that data awareness in the backend, is done just with a simple API call. So the question is, why are we not here yet? So if you like this podcast, click like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.